Donald Trump successfully convinced his NATO partners to up their defence spending, but so far, PM Anthony Albanese is holding firm when it comes to how much money Australia spends.
We have lifted our spending. I have said very clearly we will invest in the capability that Australia needs.
Now, here to help us understand where this story might go next is defence analyst Jennifer Parker. Jennifer, why is the spending on defence such a hot topic at the moment?
Yeah, and look, thanks for having me on. I actually think defence spending has been a hot topic for a while, but what's kind of turbocharged that is two things. One, at the Shangri-La Dialogue a couple of weeks ago, we saw the US Secretary of Defence Pete Hegseth request Australia spend more on defence. Now, that was to be expected. There have been some murmurings about this. But about 4 days after the Shangri-La Dialogue, they actually produced a summary of the conversation with Richard Marles, our Deputy Prime Minister, demanding 3.5%. The second element is an ongoing conversation throughout the year has been the current US administration's demand for NATO to spend more on defence. US administrations have been talking about this for 25 years, but the language in which the current US administration is talking about it has been very different. That has really supercharged the defence spending debate in Australia.
Yeah, it's supercharged is the word, all right. Now, you've spent more than 20 years in the Australian Department of Defence. In your experience, does spending more on defence automatically equate to better national security?
So it doesn't automatically equate to better national security. Of course, money in is one element. The ability to spend that money wisely is a second element. And the ability to employ the capabilities that we have effectively is a third element, and that's in the defence portfolio. Of course, national security is broader when you think about diplomacy, economics, all of those other elements that make up national security. But I would say one of the challenges right now is in 2023, we had a defence strategic review that talked about our strategic circumstances. And that was on the back of 2020, where the previous government, a Liberal government, said that we no longer had 10 years strategic warning time in the Defence Strategic Update. Now, what that means is the chances of a crisis or conflict in our region, although not inevitable, are increasing. Now, the challenge when it comes to money in the defence budget is we're at about 2.02% of GDP. So 2% of the economy is spent on defence capabilities and the rest of defence things. During Cold War, we averaged 2.7% of the economy. And in the 50s, which is the exact time in history that we are comparing ourselves to when we say the most significant strategic circumstances is World War II, we spent over 3%. And the challenge is when you look at the chances of a crisis or conflict in this region and you think about defence's ability to protect Australia against that, they don't have the right capabilities. And although the government has correctly increased defence spending, the first government to do so since 2016, it is not enough to protect Australia. And I could list a bunch of capabilities right now that we would need, including, if you think about the strikes that we've seen between Israel and Iran this year, the integrated air and missile defence, the ability to protect against ballistic missiles. Australia needs to rapidly invest in that. There are other areas as well, space communication, the list goes on. So really, yes, there are more things to national security than just defence spending, but it is a key handbrake on our ability to protect Australia at the moment.
Yeah, it's fascinating if you peel back a couple of layers and look what the money might actually be spent on. I think that's a fascinating discussion because everybody knows about AUKUS, hundreds of billions of dollars, and the timeline associated with actually getting our hands on a nuclear submarine. Who knows how long that will take? Are there things that we can achieve in the short term if there is an increase in spending? Things like, say, attack drones, which we've seen them deployed in the Ukraine conflict and, of course, in the Middle East as well recently. Is that something that we have capabilities?
There are a range of things that we can spend money on right now to address the capability deficit within the Australian Defence Force. Drones or uncrewed aerial vehicles, surface vehicles or uncrewed underwater vehicles, commonly called drones, is an element of that. But you have to remember that Australia's geography is fundamentally different to that of Ukraine, different to that of Israel, and different to that of Iran. So yes, drones are a key element of modern warfare, but they won't play the same role in the protection of Australia's national interest because we're an island nation that they do in those countries. So that's an element. But when you see people talking about all we need to do is invest in drones and protect our territory, that's people fundamentally misunderstanding how you protect Australia. Because to be honest, you don't need to step foot on Australia. You don't need to launch a missile at Australia to bring Australia's economy and therefore its security to its knees. All you need to do is intercept our maritime trade.
Yeah, that's right. We're pretty easy to cut off from the world, or those underwater communication cables that maybe there was a Chinese research vessel sailing over the top of. I think we have some vulnerabilities, that's for sure. And now, in terms of Donald Trump and what his administration is doing at the moment, what do you think the end game is as far as pushing for their partners to increase defense spending? Is it just a coincidence that America is also the world's largest exporter of weapons?
Look, I actually don't think that's a primary driver. Of course, that's potentially an added economic benefit for the US, but I actually think it is fundamentally because of the concern of increased conflict. Now, when you think about it, the multilateral system in the UN Security Council has fundamentally broken down. And I could go into the whole reasons of why that is, but that's a difficult situation to be in. The second trend we're seeing is states are increasingly using military power to solve their problems. We've seen that in Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. We've seen that between Israel and Iran. We've seen that between Israel and Lebanon. We have seen that in China's aggression in the South China Sea and around Taiwan. This is an increasing trend. What that means is the likelihood of some sort of crisis or conflict is increasing. And I think the US administration, although I don't necessarily agree with their methods or their language, are actually concerned about the chances of a conflict. And that's a conflict on two fronts: a European conflict with Russia expanding their invasion of Ukraine to other countries, which is genuine concern, and a conflict in the Indo-Pacific as a result of increased aggression from China. Now, the US has really assessed their strategy to be able to deal with that. And the key to their strategy is actually burden sharing with allies. And in the Indo-Pacific, Australia is a critical ally. So burden sharing with Australia is important. Now, of course, I understand why the US is pushing it, but that's not why Australia should be doing this. Allies have a right to have expectations, but Australia should be doing this because we've got to ask ourselves, can we fundamentally defend right now our national security interests in this dramatically changing world? And any military planner with any operational experience that looks at the current capabilities of the ADF, despite the hardworking women and men in the ADF, would say no. And we need to address that. And one of the ways we need to address that is with spending more money in a quicker time frame.
Yeah, and things moving fast in politics. So, well, look, that's not very likely, but we'll have to wait and see. It's an ongoing conversation that will be very interesting to follow in the years to come. Defence analyst Jennifer Parker, really appreciate these insights on Newsworthy today.
Thanks so much.